Hello guys and welcome back. This is a section on forms, so we'll be covering the following topics in it. We'll start with the template driven forms. We'll have a look at form validations. We'll have a look at how exactly we can create forms. Forms and how we can create multiple hierarchies in the form values. Then we'll have a look at the reactive forms and why exactly they are used. We'll have a look at data bindings and binding with different control types. And then we'll also have a look at custom form validations in this section. Okay, so there is quite a lot to cover, and I hope you guys are excited as I am. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye. Hello guys and welcome back. So in Angular, there are basically two ways in which a form can be created. It is either a template driven approach or a reactive approach. In template driven approach, we generally use the form tag, and Angular automatically interprets as a form and creates a form object representation for this form. And we can add some other elements to that form object, like some controls, using the ng model tag. And we can also group multiple controls together using the ng model group. And this is a very simple way of creating forms in Angular. We can have the value of this form using the form.value object that is present on the JSON representation of the form. And then we can use the basic HTML validations for validating those form fields in that form. And if we want to, like, say, for example, create custom validations, then in that case, we can use directives. Okay, so this is the template driven approach. Then we have the reactive form approach, and this is a programming paradigm oriented around the data flow and propagation of changes. So basically, the form is all created inside the TypeScript class, and then it is attached to the form template using some directives that we have. Okay, but this is a more complex approach, but then this approach gives you a more flexible way of dealing with validations, and you can also dynamically add form fields inside this form. Okay, so in this first section, we are going to talk about the template driven forms, and then we will have a word regarding the reactive forms and how can they be created. Okay, so in the next section from now, we will be having an introduction to basically template driven forms, and then we'll also add up multiple features to this form. We'll start from scratch and then we'll add on to uh, different aspects of template driven forms in Angular. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye. Hello guys and welcome back. In this section we are going to talk about template driven forms. So in the last section we saw that template driven forms are created by Angular when it sees a form tag inside one of our templates. And with the help of the tag that that Angular sees, it also generates an object representation of this form. So say for example, if we wanted to implement a form in one of our templates and then use the template driven approach to create that form and its representation, then we'll first have to start with the module, and we'll have to add the forms module to the imports array, like so. That needs to be imported from at @angular/forms, and then we can basically start creating a form. So in this section we are going to do that. We will be creating a very basic bare bone of an Angular form. Okay, so let's say for example this is the type of structure that we want to create for our form. So in that case, I'm going to first create a component using Angular CLI. So in the components folder, I'll be creating a new user component, and this will have the template for my form. And now in the app routing module, I'm going to create a route for loading up this new user component. So new hyphen user should be the name of this route, and new user component would be the component that gets loaded. New user component is something then that I'll have to import from its respective path, like so. Also, let's do something like in the header section, add a link to the form. So new user, okay, it's already there. So let's save it. And that's pretty much it, I guess, that we'll have to do. Let's now quickly serve up the application, and let's wait for it to get served up. Here's our local host, and I've already navigated to the new hyphen user section. So once, let's wait for it to load. Meanwhile, let's go to the template of new user and get rid of the p of the paragraph tag, and in an h3 tag, I'll name this a new user form. Okay, and now if I go back and try to reload this, then I should see a new user form in here. Now let's wrap this thing inside a div with a class of container so that we have some padding from all sides, like so. This looks good now. And now we'll create the form. So for each form control there is inside this form, let's first start with a form tag. Inside this, we will need a division with a class of form hyphen control. Inside this, we will need a label with an attribute for, and let's first name this as name. Right besides this, we need an input with a class of, let's first specify the properties or the attributes that we require in here. I'll just zoom in a bit so that it's properly visible. And now we need this for, let's say, a name of this input, and let's call this name. Okay, now this will have a class of form control, like so, and we need this whole section for, let's see how many times. So I'll go back to the data again. We need it for name, username, email, 3, 4 and 5. We don't really need it for ID because ID is something that gets generated by the API. Okay, so we need this about 5 times. Let's start small and then probably we can add up to that. So if I press enter now, then it's going to generate 5 divisions for me. Now initially I don't really need an action for this form, so I'll get rid of that. And now let's wrap this properly. So I'll select this particular area here and I'll press Ctrl D to select all of them, and then I'll go to this section. I'll press enter. We are indenting this markup now so that it's a bit more readable, like so. And I guess this should be all. Now below this, let's create a horizontal rule, and in a pre-tag we are going to print something at a later stage. Let's also have another horizontal rule, and let's create a button with a class of button and button primary, and let's name this submit. Now the type of this is going to be submit. All right, let's save this, and now let's name these fields appropriately. So for the first one we had name. Let's say for this one I need a username. For this one I need an email. For this one a phone number and a website. So these two are for that. All right, so this for phone and this for the website, like so. Now I will also need to type in the field labels for this. So this is for name, this is for user name, this is going to be for email, this for the phone, and this one for website, like so. Now we are done with the markup. So if I go back, I should see some markup here, but this markup, oh, so I got the issue here. The form class that needs to be added here is not the form control, but it's going to be form. Okay, this needs to be form group and not form control. My bad. So let's just copy this one and press Ctrl D to select all of them at once. And then I'll just change this from form control to form group, like so. So now if I save this, I should see a proper form rendered over here. All right, so far so good. Now let's inspect this form, and inside this div we should have a form tag. Now if you notice this form, some of the classes have been added to this form, like ng untouched, ng pristine, and ng valid. And now looking at these, the names of these classes, I can be assured that these classes are something that have been added by Angular and not me. Okay, we can see that in here as well, right? We didn't really add a class here, but then Angular added a class for us automatically. Okay, but then in case of these form controls, I don't really have any such form classes that have been added. For none of these have been the classes added, right? So let's figure out in the next session how exactly can we add these classes to these form controls as well. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye. Hello guys and welcome back. In this section we are going to talk about template driven forms. So in the last section we saw that template driven forms are created by Angular when it sees a form tag inside one of our templates. And with the help of the tag that that Angular sees, it also generates an object representation of this form. So say for example, if we wanted to implement a form in one of our templates and then use the template driven approach to create that form and its representation, then we'll first have to start with the module, and we'll have to add the forms module to the imports array, like so. That needs to be imported from @angular/forms, and then we can basically start creating a form. So in this section we are going to do that. We will be creating a very basic bare bone of an Angular form. Okay, so let's say, for example, this is the type of structure that we want to create for our form. So in that case, I'm going to first create a component using Angular CLI. So in the components folder, I'll be creating a new user component, and this will have the template for my form. And now in the app routing module, I'm going to create a route for loading up this new user component. So new hyphen user should be the name of this route, and new user component would be the component that gets loaded. New user component is something then that I'll have to import from its respective path, like so. Also, let's do something like in the header section, add a link to the form. So new user, okay, it's already there. So let's save it. And that's pretty much it, I guess, that we'll have to do. Let's now quickly serve up the application, and let's wait for it to get served up. Here's our local host, and I've already navigated to the new hyphen user section. So once, let's wait for it to load. Meanwhile, let's go to the template of new user and get rid of the p of the paragraph tag, and in an h3 tag I'll name this a new user form. Okay, and now if I go back and try to reload this, then I should see a new user form in here. Now let's wrap this thing inside a div with a class of container so that we have some padding from all sides, like so. This looks good now. And now we'll create the form. So for each form control there is inside this form, let's first start with a form tag. Inside this, we will need a division with a class of form hyphen control. Inside this, we will need a label with an attribute for, and let's first name this as name. Right besides this, we need an input with a class of, let's first specify the properties or the attributes that we require in here. I'll just zoom in a bit so that it's properly visible. And now we need this for, let's say, a name of this input, and let's call this name. Okay, now this will have a class of form control, like so, and we need this whole section for, let's see how many times. So I'll go back to the data again. We need it for name, username, email, 3, 4 and 5. We don't really need it for ID because ID is something that gets generated by the API. Okay, so we need this about 5 times. Let's start small and then probably we can add up to that. So if I press enter now, then it's going to generate 5 divisions for me. Now initially I don't really need an action for this form, so I'll get rid of that. And now let's wrap this properly. So I'll select this particular area here and I'll press Ctrl D to select all of them, and then I'll go to this section. I'll press enter. We are indenting this markup now so that it's a bit more readable, like so. And I guess this should be all. Now below this, let's create a horizontal rule, and in a pre-tag we are going to print something at a later stage. Let's also have another horizontal rule, and let's create a button with a class of button and button primary, and let's name this submit. Now the type of this is going to be submit. All right, let's save this, and now let's name these fields appropriately. So for the first one we had name. Let's say for this one I need a username. For this one I need an email. For this one a phone number and a website. So these two are for that. All right, so this for phone and this for the website, like so. Now I will also need to type in the field labels for this. So this is for name, this is for user name, this is going to be for email, this for the phone, and this one for website, like so. Now we are done with the markup. So if I go back, I should see some markup here, but this markup, oh, so I got the issue here. The form class that needs to be added here is not the form control, but it's going to be form. Okay, this needs to be form group and not form control. My bad. So let's just copy this one and press Ctrl D to select all of them at once. And then I'll just change this from form control to form group, like so. So now if I save this, I should see a proper form rendered over here. All right, so far so good. Now let's inspect this form, and inside this div we should have a form tag. Now if you notice this form, some of the classes have been added to this form, like ng untouched, ng pristine, and ng valid. And now looking at these, the names of these classes, I can be assured that these classes are something that have been added by Angular and not me. Okay, we can see that in here as well, right? We didn't really add a class here, but then Angular added a class for us automatically. Okay, but then in case of these form controls, I don't really have any such form classes that have been added. For none of these have been the classes added, right? So let's figure out in the next session how exactly can we add these classes to these form controls as well. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye. Hello guys and welcome back. In the last section we saw that whenever Angular sees the form tag inside a template, it automatically adds some of the Angular classes like ng untouched, ng pristine, and ng valid to it. And then if we make some changes to this form and we try to submit it, right now nothing is going to happen. But then we have these classes on just this form tag. What if we wanted to add these classes to the input tag as well, so that these input tags could also be considered as a part of this form? Well, in that case, we can use something called uh, an ng model. So if I type in ng model now in this first input tag and save it, then I'll see that inside my template, if I open this up, then I'll see that the classes for this form control were also added, like ng untouched, ng pristine, and ng valid. Okay, so how exactly is this happening? Well, when we add an ng model directive to an input tag, then Angular considers this as a form control, and then it generates a JavaScript representation of this input using the ng model, and it makes a form control for this. Okay, so now let's say let's do this for all the other tags as well. So I add the ng model directive to all the inputs, and if I save this now, then I should see that all these inputs are having these classes. Okay, so we have just started to add to this form these classes or these form controls. Now in this form, there is an output property that is assigned to this form, and the name of this property is ng submit. Okay, so since this is an output property, we can bind to it using the property binding syntax, and with this I'm just going to call a method named submit on my component class. So I'll go back to this class and I'll create a method named this, and let's log form submitted to the console for now, like so. If we save this and submit the form, let's go to the console, let's submit the form, and we should see form submitted. Okay, so this is how you can listen to the submission of a form in Angular using the ng form submit, and this is how you can add multiple form controls to a form, adding the ng model directive to a particular input inside this form. So now in the next session, in the next video, we are going to talk about how exactly we can use these forms or use these controls on the form and get a JavaScript representation of this form in this submit method right here. Okay, so we will be passing the JavaScript representation of this form in the submit method as an argument, and then we'll be having a look at it inside this TypeScript class. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye. Hello guys and welcome back. Now in one of the previous videos, we saw that there are essentially three directives that we have for template driven forms. One of them we have already used, that is the ng model directive. There are two more directives of this sort. One of them is the ng model group and the other one is the ng form. In this video, we are going to use the ng form directive, but instead of using it as this, we are going to assign it to something as a value. Okay, to do that, we will be creating a template variable named, say, user form, and to the value of this user form, now we can do this as well, that we can assign something to template variables, so that instead of doing, let's say we don't assign anything as of now to the form, and just on the submit we pass in the user form itself, and then let's copy this and go to the new user component and just log this user form in here. So if I save this and go back and just click on the submit button, then the form submitted would be printed. But apart from that, I simply get the raw tags of this form. Okay, but I wanted a JavaScript representation instead of this, right? And so to get the JavaScript representation, I'll need to use a directive named ng form, right? Let's say if we simply pass this, let's just keep this as such, and we pass in the ng form in here and save this now and go back. If I click on the submit, then I get undefined right now. Okay, so again, this is not working like this. What if I assign this ng form to the user form template variable that I have? And let's, instead of passing the ng form, because Angular doesn't really know from having a look at this markup right here that there is something named ng form. It just knows that if there is a template variable, then that is something that can be passed, but ng form is something that it doesn't really have any idea about at this point. What we can do instead is we can pass this ng form directive as a value to the user form, and then when we send the user form instead of the ng form and submit it, then we get the ng form object, and this is the JavaScript representation of our form itself. It has a lot of things like the controls, and this has a controls object that contains all the form controls that we have inside our form, like the email name, phone, username, and website. And if I go out of the controls, then we also have some of the properties like dirty, disabled, enabled, then invalid, pending, pristine, and touched, untouched, valid, and a value as well. Now, if I open up the value object, then we can see that there are a lot of fields, or the fields that we had inside this form, the form controls that we had. These are all the values of these form controls, and the keys here are the names of these inputs, while the values are right now empty because these are all the input fields and the default value of any input field is empty. So empty strings are assigned to these values inside the value object. And apart from that, we have some pairs, like say for example disabled and enabled is a pair. So if at once, if enabled is true, then disabled is going to be false. Then we have dirty and pristine. These are also pairs. So if both of them are opposite of each other, so if one of them is false, then the other one was going to be true. And same is the case with touched and untouched. So if touched is false, then untouched is going to be true. Okay, so these are all the different fields that we will be going to use when we are implementing, say for example, form validations, and things like disabling the submit button when the form is invalid, or say for example uh, showing a field validation error when a particular field is invalid in that case. Okay, so we'll have a look at all these scenarios in the coming videos. So I'll see you guys in the next one. Hello guys and welcome back. Let's submit the form again and let's see what all values can be useful to us. So in this video we are going to see how we can exactly submit, or we can disable the submit button if the form is not valid. So we have the property named valid, and then we also have something called invalid that we have here. So we can use this property on the ng form. So if I go back to my template here, there is a property that can be binded named disabled. and the value of this is going to be the form object that I can have access to using the user form template variable right here. So I'll go back at the bottom, and on this form object I have something called an invalid field right here. So I'll just copy this one and paste it here. So now this should be disabled when the form is invalid. So if I save this and go back, the form can still be submitted, and the reason for this is because the form's invalid state is false and the valid state is true in this case. So how exactly can we check whether this will get disabled or not? Well, let's start with our first validation, and the validation that I'm going to use is required, and this is the built-in HTML5 input validation. So if I save this now, then I should see that the button is disabled now. Alright, so this is how you can add form validations to your form and disable a button when the form is invalid. Now in the next video we'll be talking about some other validations that you can apply to your form. Let's quickly add a value and click on submit, and if I go to, let's say, this here, in the errors section it's null right now, and the invalid state is false and the valid state is true again. So let's first talk about the other validation errors or the other validations that we can add in template driven forms in the next video, and then we'll have a look at some other features of template driven forms as well. Hello guys and welcome back. In the last section we talked about how exactly we can disable a submit button when the form is invalid. So we had a look at this required field validation that can be used. Apart from required, there are some other field validations that can be used, like say for example the min length. Let's say I have 3 in this case. Max length, that let's say I have okay, so min length let's specify it to 8 and the max length let's specify it to 20. And apart from that I have a pattern as well. So pattern says John Doe, and this is the exact field value that I am requiring, otherwise it would be marked as invalid. So if I save this now and go back, the button is disabled right now. If I type in something, it won't be enabled. If I type in John Doe, then exactly it would be submitted. Okay, so these are all the 4 different types of field validations that can be used for an input. Let's quickly see what exactly does it have, does it affect, or how exactly does it affect the errors object that we saw earlier. So I'll just get rid of this disabled attribute right now. I'll just cut it and paste it at the bottom, and let's just comment this out as of now. Let's save this, and if I submit the form right now, then and I open the ng form and click on the errors, I'll still see that it's null, and that shouldn't have been the case because we have the required validations here. So maybe I should, since I had these validations on this particular name field, I should go to the controls and then I should open it, and in the name I should have a look at the errors. So right now if I open the errors object, then it says that the required field is true in this case, right? Let's say I type something in and let's submit this form again. Now the form was submitted. The errors object again is null on the form. But if I open up the controls object again and open up the name, then in the errors object, I see a pattern error. It says that the actual value is this and the required pattern was this. Something on the lines of this. Let's say if I type something which is of say less characters than 8 and submit, and let's open up the form controls and name again, then in that case we have two errors right now. One is the min length, where it gives me the actual length and the required length, while the other one is the pattern, wherein we have the actual value and the required pattern. So essentially what I'm trying to tell you guys is that we can simply leverage the form control object on the name to basically have field validations and display errors whenever there is a validation error. So to do that, let's just quickly undo this change right here, and at the top right below the name field I'm going to place a div, and in this div I'm going to use the ng if directive, and now if I needed to have access to the form control object, just as we did right here to have access to the ng form on the similar lines, I can create a template variable here named name and assign it the value of ng model like so. Again, just like here where we assigned the value of ng form to a template variable named user form, we can also supply or we can also assign the value of ng model of a particular form control to a template variable on that form control. Okay, so the name should now receive the form control object that we had on the ng model. So now essentially what this will contain is going to be this whole form control object, and on this form control object we have the errors object, and we also have the invalid property true. Okay, so if this say name is invalid, then in that case I can simply use a paragraph to show an error to the user, and let's assign a class of alert and alert hyphen danger to this, and in the p tag that we have here, let's type something like name is required. Let's save this and go back. Now upfront I see a field validation error saying name is required, but that is something that can be quite confronting to the user because we didn't really give the user a chance to interact with the form and directly showed them the error. So that shouldn't be the behavior our form should exhibit, just for the sake of a good user experience. What would have been a better user experience is that if I did something like uh, touched. So I should first check whether this particular field is touched, and only if it is touched, I'll check whether this is invalid or not. And if this is invalid, then I should, in that case, ask the or show the user that error message. So if I navigate to this, hover or select this, and then blur away from it, then I should see the error message like so. Now we have multiple errors in here, so we can also show all of them, and to do that we can leverage the errors object that we saw earlier. Again, let's just type something. Okay, I won't be able to see that right now. I'll have to just get rid of this disabled property again. So let's cut this, save. And if I click submit again on the form, then I should see the in the controls object of the form control of name, I should see an errors object like so. And the key that we have here in the errors object would represent the actual validation error that we are, or the actual validation that we are applying on this element, while the value of this is going to be just true in this case. So on the similar lines, for each of them we will have one such field. So ng if, so if we have the name dot errors dot say required, in that case name is required would be printed, and we have four of these things like error, then we have min length, name must be at least, the min length was 8 characters long, name can be at max, the max length was 20, so 20 characters long, and name must only be John Doe, like so. So if I save this now, if I select this and blur away, then I should see these three error messages that says name is required, name can be at max 20 characters long, and okay, so this should have been max length, and this should have been pattern, like so. So if I select this and blur away, then I should initially see name is required. If I type just one character and blur away, then it should say that the name must be 8 characters long. If I type something like this and then blur away, then it is still showing me the field but nothing inside that. So looks like there is again an error in the errors object. Let's just submit this and see what exactly is the error right now. I'll open up the controls, and in name errors there is an error named pattern. Let me just go back. And I'll paste that. So name must only be John Doe. In that case, let's save this, and let's go back, type something in here. So it says name must only be John Doe. So essentially now if I type something that is greater than, oh, so it won't allow me to type something greater than 20 characters, so that won't really be an error that would be raised. But again, just to check, let's type in John Doe and then navigate away, and all the errors are gone in this case. So this is exactly how you guys can just leverage the ng model, create a template variable, and have access to the form control inside this form itself, and with that create form validations or so. Also, apart from this, we can essentially create some classes. Let's say if there was an error on this field, if I inspect this field, then it should have fields like, or it should have classes attached to it like ng dirty, ng touched, and ng invalid. Okay, so in that case, we can safely create a class, or we can just leverage these classes that we have. So let's say if the form control is touched and the form control is invalid, then in that case I should give this text box a border of 1 pixels solid red, like so. And let's save this and go back. So if I click on this, navigate away, then I don't really see that border. I guess I screwed up with the classes here. Okay, I guess we don't really need these ands here. Let's save this. And if I go back and I blur away, then I should see the field getting highlighted with a with a red border right here. Okay, so this is how you can use the classes that Angular applies to invalid fields to also add styling for invalid fields right here. Hello guys and welcome back. So in this section we are going to talk about adding some other types of fields to your form. So we are going so far we have just covered all the text inputs, but now let's also cover some of the other basic fields like a checkbox, a drop down, as well as a radio button. So let's first quickly create some fields in here. So I'll name this communication modes. This is going to be a string array. Then we have genders. This is again going to be a string array. And in the ng-on init, I'm going to initialize the genders as male, female, and other. And for the communication modes, I'm going to specify phone or email. All right. Okay. Now in this, let's start with the radio buttons for genders. So I need a div with a class of radio, inside which I need a label with let's not specify anything here, but inside this I need an input which is of type radio. So let's tap that, and so it created a label for me inside which there is an input, another label, and then the division end itself. Now since I have both the labels in the TypeScript class here, I'll just simply loop through them using ng for, and I'll do something like let gender of genders. The value of this is going to be, now since I'm using the value as a property, I should be using property bindings, so gender, and I'll also use the string binding for gender, like so. So then I should also add the ng model to it because I need this considered as a form control. So let's save this now and go back. So right now I'm just seeing one, and there are things like ng model options and some errors popping up. Let's go back and see what the issue is here. Well, if we have a look at the error, then it says that if I'm using ng model, then the name property should be applied to it. So let's apply a name property as well to it. So let's do that using here, and I'll specify the name as gender. Let's save this and go back. I'm still just seeing one radio button, and that's a bit odd. Okay, my bad. I should have placed this inside on the label, because that is something that is going to be repeated for 3 times for all the genders that we have. Now in this case we should have these 3 radio buttons getting printed to the screen, and let's place a break here so that there is a bit of some space in here. Okay, all right, now let's do the same for a select list. So this should have a class of form group, and in this we should have a select with some name and ID. I'll specify the name as communication mode. Let's just get rid of this ID, we don't really need it here. And inside the select, I should have some options with some value. Okay, so I already have these communication options here in the communication modes. So I'll just loop through them inside here, again with the help of ng for let com opt of communication modes. So the value of this is again going to be com opt, because I'm simply using property or strings here. So, and for the option as well, this one. And let's also place a label here that would be for the name that we have here. So for communication modes, like so. Let's save this and go back. And looks like we have another error. It may happen when a tag has already been closed by another tag. Maybe I used some tags somewhere in the wrong place. Okay, I forgot to close this one. Let's say communication options. And now we have these 2 communication options. By default, this empty one is selected. But on the select one, I guess we can give a class of form control, and if I save this, then it should be styled as a proper form field. And then finally, let's also have a look at a checkbox like so. I'll just copy this markup here, because the markup for a checkbox is similar to that of a radio button, and instead of radio we should have a checkbox class on the parent div, and agreement is something that we'll be using this for, and the name is going to be agreement again. The value would be the value of this checkbox when it is checked. I've placed an ng model here so that it's considered as a value, and then in here I'll also place an ng model here like so, and then type is radio, so I should change this to checkbox, and then in here I'll just simply type in I agree to the terms and conditions like so. Okay, now that we have this form and we can have the value of it as well using the form's name or something that is representing the form, which is the user form here. So let's just quickly type in the name here, and this is going to be a JavaScript object representation of the user form, and for that I can simply pass it through the JSON pipe so that it transforms that into a string. So if I save this now, I should have the JavaScript representation. Okay, sorry. So this shouldn't be the user form, just it should be the user form dot value, and I should have the JavaScript representation of the user form like so. There should be an agreement field as well. So as soon as I type something in the name, let's say John Doe, then the username is John Doe, john.doe at example.com. Um, then let me just scroll at the bottom. And as soon as I type something in, then you'll see all these fields getting populated or updated simultaneously. So let's type a phone number, say like this. And in the website section, let's type in www.google.com as of now. Let's select the gender to be male in this case. And as soon as I select one of these things, then you'll see that all these fields are also getting populated at the bottom. The communication option, let's select it to phone, let's say. And if I click on agreement, then the agreement field would be turned to true. If I unselect it, it's going to be false again. By default, it's going to be an empty string, but if I select this, then it would be true. If I unselect it, it's going to be false. And if I submit this now, then in the ng form, I should also have a field called value again that we have already used here. And this is the value that can be essentially sent out to an API. So say for example, if this was a new user form or a new user registration form, then this value could be the whole value of this form could be achieved using this value property on this ng form object. And that is something that could be sent out to an API for storing it, persisting it. Okay, so this was all regarding the value and using fields like a checkbox, radio buttons, and drop down lists inside your form. Now, in the next section, we are going to talk about some other things related to forms and especially template driven forms, like adding form controls or form control groups to your form. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye. Hello guys and welcome back. So in the last few sections, we have already seen things like adding multiple form controls to your form, adding form field validations, and then also adding things like radio buttons, select lists, and checkboxes to your form, and then also submitting the form or disabling the submit button on the form when the form is invalid, and also showing custom validation errors or sorry, the pre-built or built-in validations in Angular. Now, in this section, we are going to talk about something called the ng model group, and that can be used for essentially grouping out the fields inside our form. So, if we have a look at this object that we are considering for as the value of this form, we can see that in the address section we have fields like street, suite, city, zip code, and geo, which internally is again an object like lat and long. And then for that is the same thing for company as well. So for fields like these, we or for a value of this form or that somehow matches this format, we'll need to use the ng model group as well. Okay, so that is something that we will be using inside this video. So I'm just going to go to the template now, and in here let's start with below this form group, and I'll simply add a div here, and inside this div we will have multiple form groups. Okay, so the attribute or the directive that I'm going to use here is going to be the ng model group, and the value or the name of this form group is going to be, say, address, like so. And inside this I'll be having multiple form controls. So I'll create a div with a class of form hyphen group, inside which I need a label with a property of for, with a value of, let's say, street for now. And besides that, I need an input with a class of form control, and I also need a field or an attribute named name inside that with some value. And I need this particular sections for, let's say, about 1 2 3 4 and 5 6 7, about 7 times or so. So I'll multiply this by 7. Now we have these 7 fields, but we need these 3, not for this one, but for one another such div that I'm going to use. So ng model group, like so, and the name is going to be company, and inside that I'm going to use this div like so, these divs like so. Let's just also do the indentation here as we did before. So I'll select all these by marking one of them, and then pressing Ctrl D to select all of them. Like so. So we indented all of them. Now let's add things like ng model in all of them. So ng model, that's added. Now let's start with this one. So we have street, suite, city, and zip code. So street, the name is going to be street, and this would again be street. Then we have suite, then we have city, and zip code in the name as well, like so. And in case of a company, we have things like name, catchphrase, and BS. So this one would be name, name, and name. Then we have catchphrase, and for this one as well, catchphrase. And then for this we have BS. I don't really know what that stands for. Okay. All right. And then again inside this form group, we will have something called another form group. So another div here with these ng model group, and a name of geo, inside which we will again have two fields for latitudes and longitudes, like so. So I'll just change this from, so we have lat and lng. This is going to be for lat, 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 and this one is going to be for lng. Name is going to be lng. Let's save this, go back to the application that we have here, and now if you see, we don't really see anything here, nor do we see anything here. And for the company, it seems it didn't really create an object itself, um, which looks a bit strange to me because we already have the ng model group name as well in here. So for this one, it created an object, and after that it did not create any object for the name, catchphrase, and bs for this one. So let's see what exactly is wrong with this. Let's first change this name from bs to small bs so that we are consistent. And now I got the issue, what the issue was. So for the ng model group, we don't really assign a name, we just assign a name to the ng model group itself, like so. Okay, so that is something that I'll do the same for this one and for this address right here. And now if we save this, we should have an address with these objects, and then inside that a geo with these objects, as well as a catch or a company with this object right here. So now the value of this form looks somewhat similar to the structure that we have coming in from the JSON placeholder API, and that is something that we can eventually pass the data to when the user submits the form. So this was it regarding the template driven forms. Now let's say if there was a field related to hobbies of a user, and then I had a button here that said add hobby, and when the button was clicked, new text fields for a different hobby were to be added to this form. Right now with the template driven forms, we cannot really do that. We cannot really add dynamic fields to a template driven form, and that's where the reactive forms comes into the picture. So in the next section, we are going to talk about the reactive forms and how they can be used and implemented, and we will be again creating this form from scratch using the template driven using the reactive approach. And then we will also add a hobbies section in here wherein the user can additionally uh, add or delete some fields like for hobbies in the form itself. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Hello guys and welcome back. So in the last section we saw everything there was to template driven forms, but then there were some issues with the template driven forms. The first issue was that we didn't really have a way to implement custom validations, and to do that we needed to use directives. And the other one was that we couldn't really add or remove some components, some form controls or form groups from the form dynamically. Okay, so to figure the so to just tackle these two issues that we had in template driven forms, we can use the reactive forms approach in that case. What reactive forms does is we create forms inside the reactive forms approach inside the TypeScript class, and then we synchronize this form that we created in the TypeScript class to the view or the template of this particular component or form. Okay, so for that we will need to follow a few steps, and all of these steps are given here. So the first one is that we need to first import the Reactive Forms module, and it can be imported from Angular Forms like so. Then we will have to add it to the imports array as well, so that we could use this module inside our app module. And then inside the TypeScript class for the component in which we are willing to create the form, we will have to import some classes like form group, form control, form array, and validators from Angular Forms. Then inside the ng on init lifecycle hook, we need to create a form group itself. So the parent of the form that we are going to create would be a form group, and each input field inside that form is going to be a form control. So a form group contains an controls object that again contains a group of form controls or other form groups, and then each of the form control inside that form group can have three arguments that can be passed to it. So we create a form group using the new keyword here, and then we pass in a controls object to it. This also takes two other arguments, that is a list of or a single validator function as a second argument, and as the third argument it takes a list of asynchronous validator functions or a single asynchronous validator function. Now, in case of the first argument that we had, we pass it the controls object, and this controls object has some key value pairs. Each key can either be a string if it is a normal string without any without any dashes or hyphens. But if there are some hyphens inside that string, then we need to essentially wrap it inside single quotation marks or double quotation marks. And then the value of this is can either be a form control like so, or another form group like so, or it can also be a form array like this. Now, for a form control, there are three things that can be passed to the constructor function of the form control, that are the initial value of that form control, a list of or a single synchronous validator function, and the third argument can be a list of asynchronous validator functions or a single asynchronous validator function. And now, let's say if you're using a form array like so, then you can add new form controls or new form groups to that form just by getting a reference to that form control using a get method on this form, and then by typecasting it into a form array, you can get access to a push method to which you can then pass a new form control or a new form group. And for a form group or a form control, these are the same syntax that would be followed. You can also remove a particular element from a form array, and to do that we'll again have access to or get access to that particular form array using the get method, and by typecasting it into a form array, and then we can call a remove at method on it and pass it an index in this case. And apart from this, we can also get access to a particular form element inside the template without having to do or write this syntax like user form.get and pass it the name of a particular control. In that case, we can simply create a property which can be of type get, and this would return essentially the form control for us like so. All right, and these are the steps that we'll need to follow inside a TypeScript class to create a form. And then to synchronize that form inside the template or the view, we need these syntaxes. So we will need a form group directive that can be accessed because we imported the Reactor Forms module. So we can have access to the form group, and to this form group, with the help of property bindings, we pass the form that was created inside the TypeScript class, and this should happen inside a form tag. Apart from that, we can have or we can bind a form control to an input using the form control name like so, and also we can bind a form group to a parent wrapping some form controls using a form group name directive like so. We can also loop through a form array and bind its form controls or form groups using such a syntax wherein we'll loop through. We'll first get a list of controls or all the controls there are inside that form array using the get method and accessing the controls object on it. And then when we get the control, we can also specify an index for each of that form control or a form group in that case. And when we want to just bind it to the template, then we can use the form control name again like this. But this time for the name field, we will be passing the index that we have for that particular form control or form group like so. And since this I will be containing, this I is going to be a property which will be containing the name of that or the index of that particular form control or form group, that will be used as a form control name. We will have to again use the property binding syntax to do this. Okay, so these are all the steps that would be required to create or implement a reactive form. Now in the next video we will be creating a normal bootstrap form, and then we will continue with these steps and I'll show you guys how exactly can a reactive form be implemented. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Hello guys and welcome back. So in this section we are going to create a bootstrap form very quickly. And this form will eventually be leveraging a reactive forms approach. So let's first create a component for that. So I'll use um, Angular CLI to create that. Uh, in the components folder, I'll create a new user reactive component. So it created a component inside the components folder like so. Let's just reload this. So the component was created here. Now inside the app routing module, I'll add a link to this. So I'll add new user reactive component, and this will be activated, or the component would be loaded when the new user reactive route is reached. So let's just copy this. Let me save this and add a link to this component inside the headers section like so. New user reactive in this case as well. Let's save this, and now Angular CLI is already running, so let me just open up the local host, and I should, if I click on the new user reactive, I should see that component text getting loaded up. Now I'll just close all of these and I'll just open the new user reactive form. We'll concentrate on this form only now. Let me just zoom in a bit. Now I'll first start by creating a div with a class of container. Inside that I need an h3 tag. This says new user reactive form. And below this I'm going to create a form inside which I need a div with a class of form hyphen group, inside which I need an input, before that a label, and besides that an input with a class of form hyphen control. And each of this input right here is also going to have an attribute named form control name like so. So this is something that I need about 14 times. So if I click on enter, I'll see all these getting created. Now let's just quickly select one of these and press Ctrl D until all of them get selected, and let's indent it a bit so that it's a bit more clear to read. like so. I guess I did something wrong here. All right, so far so good. Perfect. Now let's get rid of the action attribute on the form because we don't really need that. And now if I save this and go back, I should see a form of containing these fields, right? Okay, let's create a button quickly that submits the form. So I'll create a button with the class of button and button primary. And let's also specify the type as submit. And this would be submit in here. And again, just like the form that gets created, it also has an ng submit event that can be listened to, and I'll call a submit method on this like so. Now submit is something that I'll have to define in the TypeScript class, and this won't do anything as of now. Let's also quickly name all of these. So this is for name, and form control name we'll specify later, or let's do that right away. So let's specify the name like so, and for this one this is going to be a username, and form control name would be user name. Then this one is for email, and the form control name is again email. This one is for phone, 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 website, website, and the form control name again for website. Then we have some other things. So let's wrap these fields inside a field set. Let's get rid of the disabled attribute here. And in the field set, we'll be having a legend like so that says address. And right below that, we'll have about 4 form fields. So first, second, third, and fourth. Let's cut and paste. All right. Now for each of them, we have a street, which is going to be a street. The form control name is going to be street again in this case. Then we have suite, suite, and in the form control name we are going to have suite. Then for this one we will be having city, and for form name also city. Then this one would be zip code, zip code, and zip code. Now inside this we'll also have 2 fields for the geo section. So I'll cut these 2 from here and add another field set like so, inside which I'm going to have a legend. This is going to be geo, inside which we'll have 2 fields. This one would be for let, and this would be let, and then we'll have one for longitude. And then finally we will have another field set that is going to be for a company. So company, oh sorry, my bad, we should have a legend in here that says company, and after that we'll have about 3 more fields. Let's cut them and paste inside this. So the 3 more fields would be for again a name, and this would be company name this time. The form name is going to be name. Then this would be for catch phrase, and the form control name is catch phrase. And then finally we'll have one for BS and BS again here. So if I save this now, then I should see a form getting displayed onto the screen. So far so good. Now in the next section, in the next video, we will be creating a reactive form inside the component, and then we'll add the form fields. We have already named the form fields in here, so we will simply, once we create the form here, we should see all the default values for that form getting applied on this forms template here. So in the next video, we will create that reactive form. I'll see you guys in that video. Bye. Hello guys and welcome back. So in the last section we created this Bootstrap form for us. It's a very long form but we created it in minutes using Emmet. Now in this section we are going to create a template, a reactive form inside the TypeScript class. So let's get started with it. Now this form is, let me just name this user form, and it's going to be of type form group, which is something that I'll have to import from Angular forms like so. Apart from that, I'm also going to use some other classes like form control. I'm also going to use a form array, and I'll also use something called validators. So all these classes are something that I imported from Angular forms. And then inside the ng on init, I'm going to initialize this form to a new form group. Now this form group requires three things, the last two of which are optional. The first one is a controls object, and this is an object that contains keys in the form of strings or just keys with some name, and a corresponding abstract control. Now an abstract control is a parent or base class for classes like form group, form control, and form array. So the key here inside the controls object, each key can either be assigned an instance of a form group, a form control, or a form array. The second argument to this is going to be either a validator function or an array of validator functions, which would then apply to the whole form itself. And the third argument is going to be an asynchronous validator function or an asynchronous validator function array that will again be applied to the whole form itself. Right now, we'll just have a look at the controls object. So let's create an object here, and we will need a few fields in here. So let's start with the name field, which is going to be a new form control like so. And again, this form control has three arguments that can be supplied to it. The last two are optional, that is the validator or a validator function, or a validator functions array, and an asynchronous validator function or an asynchronous validator functions array. The first argument though is also optional, and it is the form state, which essentially represents the initial value of this form control. So let me just type in the initial value as an empty string. Now I'm just going to press Shift Alt and the downwards arrow key to just um, duplicate this line for a few times like so. And let's start with the second field, which is going to be a username like so. It is again a form control. The third one would be an email. Fourth one would be a phone. Fifth one would be a website like so. And the sixth one is going to be an address, but this time instead of being something else, it is going to be uh, an instance of a new form group like so. And again, just like we did that for this one, we would need to pass in an object like so, and then this object is going to have some fields. So fields would be like street. Let me just copy about four of them, cut them from here and paste it inside this address. Format this accordingly. Now street is going to be a form control, and same would be the case with suite. city, and zip code. And then inside this, we'll also have a geo object, which is again a new form group. So we'll pass an object to it like so. And this will have two fields like a latitude and a longitude. So I'll name this lat and LNG like so. And then finally, we'll have one for a company, which is again going to be a new form group. This form group will again contain the three objects that we have here. The first one is going to be a name. The second one is going to be a catch phrase. And the third one is going to be just BS, like so. All right, so now we have a basic user form ready with us. And let's save this. Now, the one thing that is required here is to just bind this user form to the template of this form that we have here. To bind that, we will use something called an ng form, which is going to be a directive, and we will be using the directive as an attribute binding, sorry, as a property binding. And in here, we will specify the name of this form, that is user form, like so. So now what this will do is, let's say if I type in the name like John Doe here and save this, inside my template, I'm getting an error right now, which means there's something wrong. It says that cannot bind to ng form since it isn't a known property of the form. So I'm pretty sure why I'm getting this error, and that is because for reactive forms we need to use the reactive forms module that I have here, but I have also added it to the imports array, so looks like that is not the issue. Ng form. Okay, let's go to the template again and see what exactly we have done here. So we have an ng form. Okay, I guess I have used the wrong directive. This is the directive that we use inside a template driven forms. For reactive forms, instead of using ng form, we use the directive named form group. So let's save this and let's go back to the application. All right, so now we see the form getting loaded, and the initial value that I set inside the TypeScript class is also getting applied to this form here. Now let's quickly set some default values for all of these fields so that we are pretty sure. So I'll specify the phone as this, the website as john.com. Address is going to be 123 Annie Street. Suite is going to be Suite 1400. City is going to be Bellevue, and zip code is going to be 98004. Let me type in a random geo here. The company name is going to be, let me name this Beautiful Destinations. The catchphrase is going to be see world differently. And let's specify the BS as a company that creates beautiful content for travel, ports, and hotel chains. Let's save this and go back. So I should ideally expect all of these fields to get populated. But I just see these above 4 fields getting populated and rest of them are still not populated, and I know the reason why. That is because we need to specify a particular attribute again, and this attribute is going to be the form group name, which in this case is going to be address, and for this one, form group name. This For this one, it's going to be geo, and lastly for the company, it's going to be company, like so. So now if I save this and go back, I should see all these fields getting populated with the respective form values. So this was it regarding creating a reactor form inside the TypeScript class and binding it to the template of this form. Now in the next section, we are going to talk about handling validation errors. I'll see you guys in the next video. Hello guys and welcome back. So in the last section, we created the reactive form inside our TypeScript class, added some default values to it or initial values to it, and then we added these form fields to the form template here using the form group, form control names, and form group name. So if I go back here, then I'm also seeing all these fields getting populated with the appropriate texts in them. Now, in this section, we are going to talk about creating or using validations. So let's start with the name. In this one, we can use validators, a single one with the help of the validators class that we imported from Angular Forms. And on this form, we have a validator function named required that we can use. So this is a function which is of type static, and that's why we don't really need to create an instance of the validators class to essentially use it. And we are not going to call it here like so, because that is something that Angular is going to do. So if we just do this and save, then if I go back, then I should essentially, if I don't type in anything and tap away, then um, if I inspect this particular element right here, then I should see the class is named ng-invalid getting added to this class or added to this particular input field right here. Okay, so to now show validation errors for this particular field, let me just quickly copy the style that we used here, and that is something that I will be using for this one as well. Let's also use this form control class. So if the class is form hyphen control and ng touched and ng invalid, then we need to apply a border of 1 pixel solid red. So let me just cut this text from here and blur away. And I don't really see that border as of now. I guess there is some issue. So let's just quickly see that. I'll just open the TypeScript file here, and this has the validators.required added to it. Um, Inside this, we have the form control name as name, which was again this one right here. And for this input, we need the fields getting applied. Let's save this again and check back. If I cut the text from here and tap away, I'm still not seeing those red borders. Okay, maybe let's just quickly dog this to the right side, and I guess let's remove the form control class and let's see that in action now. So if I cut the text from here and tap away, it's now using the form validation error styling on this field. So this is how you can use basically a required validator. Let's say if we wanted to use multiple validation rules in here, then we can do that as well. But instead of using validators like this, we'll have to, in that case, wrap it inside an array like so. So this generally makes sense only if we have multiple validators that too synchronous in nature. So if we do have multiple, then we can use an array of sorts. Um, Let me also use validators dot min length, and let's specify it as 8. Let's also use a pattern. So validators dot pattern. This is another function that returns a validator function, and same is the case with min length. We are able to call these functions, but we didn't really call the required function, and that is because the required function itself is a validator function, while the min length as well as the pattern calls would return a required function like so, or a validator function like so. Okay, so I'll specify the pattern here inside a string. Let's specify just John Doe for right now, and let's go back. So if I just remove Doe from here and tap away, then again it's invalid. Now what if we wanted to show validation errors? Well, in that case we can use a div, and we can apply a class of mm, alert and alert hyphen danger, and in here we will specify the text that we want to get displayed for each validation error. This div first of all should be visible only if we'll need to have access to this form control right here, and that is something that can be done using the form name. So user form, and we can call a get method on it and pass the name of the form control name right here, and that is name in this case. So form control name dot, if this is touched, and this is invalid as well. So let me just quickly copy it here and paste, and invalid. Then in that case I need to show the validation error saying that name is invalid like so. If I save this and go back, and let's just change the name here, tap away, and it says that name is invalid. What if we wanted to show specific errors for a particular error type? Well, in that case, again, we can use the errors object as we used inside template driven forms. So we can have access to this form using this form control using the get method right here, and then we get something called an errors object that has specific validation errors for each error type. So it can have a required error. In that case we'll say that name is required, and let's copy this 3 times. We can also have a min length error, and I can specify that name must be at least 8 characters long, and I can also specify the error named pattern, and let's specify the error message as name must, or name can only be John Doe. Alright, let's save this and go back. If I type Siddharth in here and tap away, then it says that name can only be John Doe. If I just type in Sid and navigate away, then it says that name must at least be 8 characters long and name can only be John Doe, because there are 2 validation errors in this case. If I type in John Doe, however, I will get rid of those errors. So this is how you can use multiple field validation errors for a particular form control. Now the syntax that we have here is a bit long and it's not that clean, right? So there is a way to tackle that, and to tackle it, we can essentially create a get property with the name of say name, and what this will do is it will return this dot user form dot get name. So whatever is returned from this get method, which would essentially be the form control object, that would be returned from this name. And to use it, we can simply replace the user form dot get name, all the instances of it, with just name dot errors and name dot touched and name dot invalid. So if I go back, then this should still work as expected. Name is required. If I type something in, then 8 characters long and John Doe error is also getting printed. John Doe, and the name and the error now goes away. Now, just in case of the template driven forms as well, we also have something for the expected or required length in here as well. So again, that is something can use in here. We'll just use the min length error object on which there is a required length attribute that can be used. So if I save this now and go back to the application, then it should again work as expected, like so. All right. Okay, so this is how you can essentially use built-in form validations and create multiple validations as well and use them inside your class, like so, by just calling in the validators dot these methods that we have here on the validators object. All of these are static in nature, so we don't really need to create an instance of the validators class, and then we can simply get a hold of all these error messages and show them or print them to the screen using this approach here. In the next section, we are going to talk about dynamically adding form controls or form groups to our form here. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Hello guys and welcome back. So in the last section we added some form validations to our reactive form. Now we are following such structure to for our form to generate some value. But let's say if I wanted to add some other fields as well to it. For example, let's say if I wanted a field set in here, let me just get rid of this disabled property. And inside that we had a legend that said hobbies, and we also had a button here to add some hobbies. So let me just quickly create that button. I'm just gonna go to the Bootstrap website and I'll just copy this glyph icon that I have here, so I can essentially inside a span tag add a class of this, and I should see a plus icon over here. Let's save this and go back to the application. So now we have a plus sign. What if I wanted to just click on this and add some form fields to this form to add hobbies? And then each of these form fields would have a delete button as well. So whenever I clicked on that delete button, those hobbies could get deleted from the form. So this is especially where reactive forms stand out, and that is reactive forms are capable of dynamically adding or removing form fields or form controls as well as form groups from a reactive form. So that is what we are going to do in this section. I'll go to the component here and I'll add a section for hobbies, like so, and this is going to be something like a form array. Okay, so the form array contains a control or controls, which would be an array of controls, and again it would also contain a validator function or an array of validator functions, or as the second argument, and as a third argument it's going to contain an asynchronous validator function or an array of asynchronous validator functions. So I'm just going to specify it as empty as of now, but then I need the user a way to just add some form fields when they just click on the add button. So I'll create a method named add hobby to this, and inside this we will get access to the hobbies form array using the get method, like so. And now, right now, I don't really have um, things like say push on it, because the get method returns an object of type abstract control, so Angular doesn't really know that this is of type form array. So we'll have to explicitly typecast this into a form array. That is something that I'm going to do using this syntax right here, like so. So I'll wrap this inside a parenthesis, and then now I can have a push method onto it. To this push method, I'll again pass in an abstract control, and as we already discussed, abstract control is the base class for anything like a form group or a form control or a form array as well. In this case, we are just going to use it for form control, but we can use it for form array as well. So if we try to add a new form control, then we can use the new syntax for a form control, and to this I'll just pass mm, an empty string as the initial state, and I won't pass any form validations as of now. So this is how you can add these form a new form control to a form array. Now to show this or present this on the UI though, we will need something else. So we will first need a div. Now the UI that I'm going to go for is something of let me just navigate to the input group. So I need a UI of this sort, wherein we will have an input group, a text field, and then a button right besides it that essentially is a delete icon. So let me just copy this markup here, and I'll just paste this in here. Now I need a text field with class form control, and let's specify the placeholder as hobby in here. I'll just get rid of the area described by right now, and in here in the class input group add-on, I'll also add a class for the trash icon right here. So I'll just copy this class and paste it in here as well. Okay, I'll get rid of this ID right now, and I don't really need this right here. So I'll save this. Now if I wanted to just show them on the UI on the click of this add button, then I'll have to bind to the click event of it, and then I'll have to listen to it, and then whenever it is clicked, then I should call the add hobbies method that I've defined inside my TypeScript class, like so. And whenever a new hobby component or a new hobby control is added, then I should also um, display it. So that is what I'm going to do. I'll use the ng-for syntax and let form control off, or let's say let hobby control off. Now in here I'll need to get access to the hobbies section, so I'll do that using the user form. So where was I? Here, right here. So user form dot get, I'm going to have access to the hobbies, and on this control I have an array with the name of controls, like so. So I can have access to them. Now for this input that we have here, I'll also have to specify something called a form control name, and this form control name would be the index for just one hobby control inside this controls array. So to have access to that index, I'll also do something like let I equal to index, and now I can pass that value of I in here, but since I is a property and I need to bind to it, I'll be using the property binding syntax, like so. All right, so if I save this now and go back to the application here,
If I click on the add hobbies button, then I should see a hobby getting added to my screen. And there's also a delete button in here. We'll just make this work soon. So if I click on add hobbies, then I should see multiple hobbies getting added to my form. But I have this delete button as well that is not working as of now. Nothing is happening when I'm clicking on it. So if I wanted to remove dynamically some some form controls from my form, then I could also bind to the click event of it, and I'll call the delete hobby method on this that I'll have to create inside my TypeScript class. So let's do that. Now again, to have access to this hobbies section, from where exactly we will be um, deleting one specific form control, we can call a method named remove at, which requires an index, and this is going to be the index of the form control that we want to remove from here, or the form group that we want to remove from here. So I'll pass I as the index to it and save it, and then this is going to receive an index I, and then I can pass the index right here like so. So if I save this now and go back to the application, then let's click on hobbies, and in this case we'll be able to delete them as well like so. Again, let's click on them, and let's make sure that the specific button that we are clicking on is only getting deleted. So I'll type in hobby 1. Let me just copy this and paste it over multiple lines like so. And now if I click on delete, then hobby 2 got deleted. If I click on hobby 4, it will get deleted, and so on and so forth. So this is how you can essentially dynamically add form controls or form groups, and also remove them dynamically from your form. This was it regarding dynamically adding and removing form controls from a reactive form. In the next video, we are going to talk about creating custom validations and using them inside our reactive form. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Hello guys and welcome back. In the last section, we saw how we can dynamically add or remove form controls or form groups from our reactive form. In this section, we are going to talk about creating custom validations in reactive forms. So every validation that we have in Angular form is basically it returns us either a validation error, so of this type that can be imported from Angular forms, or it returns us null. Okay, and a validation error here essentially is an object with a type with a key of type string, and a value which can either be an object which then contains um, multiple fields, just as we saw in the case of min, length, and pattern, or it can either be just true that we saw in the case of required. Okay, so now that is something that we are going to create in this section. So to do that, just on the lines that are similar to the validators that we have in Angular, it's essentially a class inside which these are methods defined, and all these methods are of type static, and that's why we are able to essentially use them without even having to create instances of the validators class. So to start with this, we'll first try to create a class using Angular CLI, and in the classes folder we'll create a class named custom.validations.ts, and it's going to create a class for me named custom.validations.ts. Sorry, my bad. I'll just rename this to custom validations like so. Let's save this. I'm also going to rename this file to uh, let's rename this to custom.validations ts like so. All right, now our file will have functions. So let's say we have a function named unique. Now each function in here receives something called control, and each control in here is of type abstract control, that is something that can be imported from Angular forms like so, and it returns something called a validation errors, which is again something that will be imported from Angular forms, but it can also return null in this case. So let me start by returning null here, and let's say based on the value that we have on this control, if it is unique, then we will um, and if it is not already existing, then we will return null, and if it does exist, then we will return an object with the name of unique, because that's what Angular also goes for. It's basically a convention. So what we will do is we'll first check for the value in control, and since this is a control of type abstract control, we should see a value property in it like so. Let's just hard code the value that we are looking for here as cold. So if cold is going to be the value, then we would be returning an object with a key named unique and a value of true. Else we are going to return null. So I'll just get rid of this next line. Let's save this, and to just use this inside our component, we will use it for the username field here. And since this is a synchronous validation, we can simply use this class custom validations dot, and we have a method named unique in here, custom validations dot unique. And now this needs to be of type static so that we can use it without having to create an instance. And now we get rid of this error here like so. All right, now inside the template we will be logging an error if this is invalid. So let's just copy this markup from here and paste it over here. I'll just indent it a bit. Also let's create a getter for username, which would essentially return the username form control. So I can use it now inside this. So I can do something like username if it is touched, and if this is invalid, then in that case, if the error is, let's say, of unique, then we'll say that username must be unique like so. Let's save this and go back. So if I type in cold and toggle away or blur away, then I should see username must be unique getting printed or displayed onto the screen. So this is how you can essentially create a synchronous validation um, inside a class that can then be used inside any other class, or any other component class that you are intending to. In the next video, we are going to talk about creating an asynchronous validator and then using it inside our um, new user reactive component. I'll see you guys in the next video. Hello guys, and welcome back. In the last section, we created a custom validator which was synchronous in nature, but there might be times when you might have to call a web API to, or a service to, or a REST API to check for some values, and then based on the response from that API, then you might have to show the user an error in that case. So for that purpose, we can use asynchronous validators as well in Angular's Reactor Forms, and that is something that we are going to create right now. So we will create a static method again, but this time we'll just call it async unique, which would again have a control object which is of type abstract control. And this, instead of directly returning validation errors or null, it would return a promise that would wrap a validation errors object or null, or simply null for that matter. So now in this case, we'll just return a new promise which takes a callback function inside which we have two functions that can be called. One would be a resolve block, so like this, and one would be reject like this. Okay, now just to simulate that this was a service call and it took a few seconds, we are just going to use the set timeout method, and in this we are going to call a method after 2 seconds. Let's make this 5 for now. Okay, so now let's just check. We'll use the same logic here that we had at the unique validator, but instead of now passing in or returning these things here, we will be calling the resolve method with these fields. So we will resolve with an object that contains a key named async unique this time, and a value of true if the value of this is going to be cold, or we'll resolve with null otherwise in that case. Let's save this, and now to use this inside my component class, I will add one more field to it. I'll name this custom validations dot async unique like so. Let's just get rid of this so that both of them don't really clash with each other, and I'm going to um, copy this, but I'll just comment this out for reference. And now in this case, we'll say async unique, and we'll just specify that the username must be unique in this case. So now if I save this and go back to the application, and if I type in the username as old, let's wait for about 5 seconds till this gets checked, and after 5 seconds we get the username must be unique. Let's try that again, and after 5 seconds the error gets printed. Okay, so this is one sort of a asynchronous validator that can be used. Now let's say if for the time it was fetching the details from the server, we need to show a placeholder text like something like this, which says checking for uniqueness from server values. Okay, so if we wanted to show this in here in the form, then right now it would be visible always, but that is something that we don't really need. But then whenever a form is checking or a form control is being checked for a particular value, then its state goes to pending, and the class ngfn pending is also appended here. So Let's check that quickly. So we can see that ng-pending is appended to it, and we will also be able to have a pending attribute or a pending property specified on this username field that can be used. So we can check for that. So I'll do an ng if. So if username dot pending, then we need to show this message right here, like so. Now if I go back, it should give us a proper improved user experience. Username dot pending. Okay, now it's gone. So let's say I type in hold. So it says checking for uniqueness from server values. And after 5 seconds, the placeholder message gets removed, and now we see the error message on the screen. And if I go back and type in holder, then it checks, and after 5 seconds it automatically gets removed from the DOM. So this is how you can use asynchronous validators to check for uniqueness or some other use case of this sort in a reactor form. In the next video we are going to talk about how we can basically clean up the form just by a click of a button. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Hello guys and welcome back. So in this last video of this section, we are going to talk about resetting the form. So let's say I had a button here like so, and it had the text reset. Its type is just button and not submit, and its button and button warning. Let's try this class out. Save this, and if I go back to the page here, then I should see a reset button as well. Now let's bind an event named click to it, and I should I should call the reset form method when this is clicked. So now if I go back, let's just specify this method in here. What I can do now is call the user form method dot. There's a method named reset on it. If I call it, then it should reset the form for me. So if I go back now, we already have all these fields filled up, but if I click on reset, then it should basically clear out all the form for us, right? So this is how the form can be resetted in one go. And this was it regarding reactive forms and the Angular forms as a whole. In the next video, we will be talking about leveraging, in the next section, we would be talking about leveraging third-party libraries like Firebase and Angular material. And after that, we'll have a look at unit testing in Angular. So I'll see you guys in the later sections of this training. Bye. Hello guys and welcome to part 7 of this training. Now in the earlier parts we have discussed about each and every building block there is to an Angular application, and we have covered mostly all of them in detail. In this section we are going to talk about integrating our Angular application with third-party modules and libraries. So we'll start with the material design Bootstrap library that we have here. So as you can see, it can help you out in building beautiful templates for your single page applications. Now, some of the components that we have here in Material Design Bootstrap, let's say for example, a few types of buttons of some sorts like these are pro components, so they would be paid in that case. So we won't really be able to use them. Same is going to be the case with some other form components like checkboxes and radio buttons. So in that case as well, we won't be really able to use them. So for those purposes, we are going to use the components that we have from Angular material because it's literally free of cost. So we'll be able to use them without
investing anything in it. So we'll start with material design bootstrap, and then we'll slowly implement, or we'll slowly transition to Angular material. We'll slowly introduce it into our Angular applications. And then once time permits, we'll also have a look at Angular Fire 2, with which you can basically integrate your Angular application with Firebase. So let's get started with each and every topic in this training part in the next video. Hello guys and welcome back. As stated, we are going to first start with a material design bootstrap project. So if you go over to their website, it's mdbootstrap.com/angular, then you'll be able to see or find a startup guide to to creating a project with it. Um, so let's see where exactly can we find that. Let's go to the download section here, and it will take us to this getting started with Angular Bootstrap guide. And just make sure that you are on the Angular version of this website only, because they have the websites for other versions like Vue.js, React.js, and jQuery as well. So we just need to go to the Angular version of it, and we are going to start installing it using npm. So I'll go to the 5-minute quick start guide here, and these are all the prerequisites for it. So you should have an Angular CLI version of 1.5.0 to 1.6.5. So if I go to my command prompt here, and I check for my version of of Angular CLI, I'll type ng space -v, and this should return my version of Angular CLI, which is 1.6.5 right here. Okay. All right, so that's taken care of. And since this is the version, Angular CLI is going to create an Angular application with a version greater than 5. So I don't really need to take care of that as well. Now I already have Angular CLI installed. That's why I was able to basically run this command here, ng space -v. And I also have TypeScript installed. So if I type in TypeScript space -v, okay, maybe TSC space -v, then I should have a version of TypeScript compiler as well. So TypeScript as well is installed. That's a good sign. Now I can simply use Angular CLI to generate a project. So let's get started with that. So I'm going to copy this command here that says create new Angular project using Angular CLI command. So I usually like my projects inside a folder in the C drive in development inside Angular, like so. So I'll just navigate to that, and now I'll start with the new project here. Let's just break this to a new line so that you guys are able to see. And yeah, I guess now we can just paste in the command here, and I'll name this project my first MD, like so. So it created all these files for me automatically, and now it's installing all the packages. So we'll wait for them to get installed, and I'll see you guys once this installation is done. And as you can see, all the modules that it was installing have finished installing now. So now if I can simply navigate to the project folder that I created, and its name is my first MD. So cd my first MD, like so. I'll clear out the console, and if I type ng serve -o, then it should serve up the application, and it should open the application in front of me. And as you can see, the application is open now. But what you see here is a simple Angular CL, a simple application created by Angular CLI, but it doesn't really have Bootstrap in it, or neither it has Angular material in it, because the text or the fonts that we see here are just plain, um, and not the ones that come up with Bootstrap. So in the next video, we'll be integrating Angular Material Bootstrap with it. So I'll see you guys in that video. Bye. Hello guys and welcome back. So in the last video, we created an Angular CLI project and we served it up, and this is how it looks like right now. Now we are going to slowly introduce Material Design Bootstrap into it. So I'm gonna go to their website again, and now it asks me to install a few more modules. So I'm gonna do that. I'll just break this up, and I'll open Visual Studio Code in here. So I'll type in code space dot, and it should open Visual Studio Code for me like so. And now I'll just get rid of this welcome folder here, and I'll open up the terminal here like so. It's better this way. I'll slide it up so that it's a bit more visible, and I'll increase the font size as well so that it's visible in a better way. And now I'll just install this Angular Bootstrap MD dependency that I have. So let's wait for it to get installed, and let's see what all other things are required. So it asks me to add these lines to the app module files, so let's do that. I'm gonna bring this down a bit, and I'll open the source folder, the app folder inside which I have my app module, and I'm just gonna go to this. I'll import this particular class here, and I'm gonna add it to the imports array like so, and it asks me to basically call the for root method on it, so I'm gonna do that. And I should also see that my styles.css should now be styles.scss like so, which is the case. And now I need to add these modules to the styles array. So I'll just save this, and I'll go to the Angular-CLI, and I have the styles array in here, but instead of adding it here, I'm just gonna add it to the styles.scss uh, like so, and I'm gonna use the import syntax in here like so. I'm gonna place, maybe I'll use the control D command here so that I can basically do that quickly. So I added an import command, and I'll get rid of this extra space, and now I'll select this particular part again, and I'll place a tilde before it like so, and at the end I'm gonna place a semicolon like so, right? So I have these files added to the styles CSS. I also need to add a few scripts to my script stack here, so let's do that like so. And I'll also have to add this to the includes section of my tsconfig.json. So I'll open the tsconfig.json here inside the root folder, and outside the compiler options, I'm gonna add it like so. Let's save this as well, and let's also add a few more libraries that were expected. Let's see what's the progress of this one. So this was installed. Let me just exit from here because I'll now be using just the Visual Studio Code here. And let's paste this command here so that it installs chart.js and font awesome and hammer.js as well, and also save it to the package.json file like so. All right, so once all of this is done and once I serve the app again, then I should see the app running properly. So let's just wait for this package to get installed. And let me just open one more terminal in here so that I can do the installation in one of them and run the application in the other one. So I'll run the application in this one and I'll do the further installations in the second command terminal here. I'll go to the first command terminal and I'll type in ng serve space hyphen o, and let's wait for this application to get served up. So it's building the project here, and once that is done, it's giving me some errors here. Browser doesn't contain a valid alias for configuration. I guess there is some issue with the CSS module loader. So maybe I shouldn't have added it to the styles .scss. Looks like it. I'll just get rid of it from here, and I'll again copy the styles in here and add it to the Angular CLI.json's styles array like so. Let's save this and let's see what happens now. So it compiled properly now, and if I go back, let me just close this error tab here, but if I reload this section now, um, let's just break this and run it again. So it compiled the app again, and let's just go back to the application, and we now see that the styles have been applied to this one like so. So this was it regarding the initial setup of a material design bootstrap project. So we have the material designs available now with us. Let me just get rid of the second tab as well. And now from this point onwards, we can essentially start adding up some components that we have from the material design bootstrap library provided to us. So that's something that we're going to do in the next video. So I'll see you there. Bye. Hello guys and welcome back. So in the last section, we added the material design bootstrap into our Angular CLI project, and now it's time for us to add some of the components that are provided as a part of the material design bootstrap into our application. So we'll start with the navbars. So I'll click on the navbars section here, and it will open up the navbars documentation. And now I can simply copy this markup that we have right here. That's it. I'll just copy this, and I'm gonna quickly go to my application here. I'll just close all these other files. I'm going to open the app component here, and let's bring this down as well, and I'm just going to paste it like so. Let's save this and go back to the application that we have, and I should now see a drop down here in a working condition like so, right? Now, this is something that will be the base of our application, but this right that we have right here shouldn't be a part of the app component. It should be a part of its own component, right? And we have done that already. So what we are going to do is we are going to create a header component first, and then we'll add this markup to that component. So I'm going to open the second terminal that I had here, and I'm going to create a new component. In the components folder, I'm going to call it header, and the component was created. I'm just going to cut this from here. Let's save this, and I'm going to open the header components template, and I'm going to paste that here, and then I'm going to introduce this header inside the app component like so. And this essentially gives us the same result, but now the header is a part of its own component, and the app component has just the app header. I also need to implement routing here so that I can essentially go to different components or load different components when different routes are activated. So I'm going to create a module for that. I'm going to call this the app-routing module. And since the module got created, I can essentially start working on it. I don't really need the common module, so I'll remove it, and I'll remove its import as well. I'm gonna import two things in here, router and sorry, this is going to be router module and routes, which I'm going to import from at angular/router like so. And now I'm going to create a const file. I'll call this app routes, which is of type routes, which is an array of objects with two keys essentially. First is going to be path. This is going to be, let's say, home, and the component that gets loaded should be a home component. But I don't really know which component am I going to load right now, so we'll have to create some components for that as well. So I'm going to create a home component first, and the component was created, so I can essentially now open up the home component like so. This will get imported automatically. uh, Now that I have the routes, I can essentially call the router module dot for route, and I'm gonna pass this the app routes that we created here like so. I'm also going to get rid of the declarations array, and I'm gonna export the router module from here like so. Let's just see what exactly was done here. I don't really need the router here, so I'll get rid of that. It was imported accidentally. So we have the app routing module in place. I'm gonna add this module to the app module so that I can use it. So I'll add the app routing module to the imports array, which again I'll have to import from its respective place. And now inside the app component here, I'm going to add a router outlet, which would host up the component that gets loaded when a particular route is activated. So I guess this would be all for this video. From the next video onwards, we are going to create essentially routes for different components or different types of components that we are going to use from the material design bootstrap section, and we'll start to work on that in the next video. So I'll see you guys in there. Bye. Hello guys, and welcome back. So in the last section we implemented a navbar here as a part of a separate component, and we have also implemented routing in here, so we should be able to now add new links to this section and expect new components to get loaded when a particular route is activated. Now in the section that we have here, these are all the different types of configurations that can be done to your navbar. you can use certain color schemes like so. And that was it regarding the navbar. Now I'm gonna go and have a look at the buttons. So let's first quickly create a component for our buttons so that we are able to load them up. And while this gets created, let's also update the app module. So when the buttons route is reached, then I need to load up the buttons component like so. And inside the header component, let's just quickly get rid of a few things that we don't really need. So we have a drop down here, and I don't really need that drop down right now, so I'll just comment this out. And I also don't really need this search form here, so I'll do the same for it. Now home, pricing and all are there, but I don't need these right here. So I'll just comment these out. And for home, I need to go to the, let me just zoom out a little bit. And for this one, I need the router link to take me to home. While if I'm on the buttons route, then it should, let's indent this a bit as well. And if I'm on the buttons route, if I click on the buttons uh, navbar link, then I should be taken to the buttons section like so. All right, so uh, we aren't on the current here, so I should be able to get rid of this span like so. Right, let's save this now and go back. So I should have home and buttons here. It's showing both of them as active because I have active on for both of them. That should not be the case. Um, there is one more directive from Angular router that we can use, and that's router link active, to which we specify the name of the class that should be applied when a particular route is activated or a particular link is active. Now in this case, if I click on the button section, the buttons component would be loaded up. So now I can essentially start working on the buttons component. So I'll close all of these and I'll go to the buttons components template. I'll get rid of this and I'll just go to the buttons section that we have here. And these are all the button types that Angular material design Bootstrap provides us with. So I'll just copy all the markup that we have here for the buttons, and I'll go back here and paste it like so. And if I go back to the application, then I should see all the buttons getting highlighted over here, and the buttons navbar as well opening up. Apart from that, there are some other configurations that can be done to your buttons. So these are all the additional buttons there are. Uh, let's just copy in these as well, like so. Let's copy that and go back and paste it like so. I'll just name these additional buttons in an h3 tag, and I'll paste it like that. Save, go back to the application, and these are all the additional buttons there are. These were the basic buttons that we had initially. So I'll inside an h3 tag type in basic buttons. Let's save. Apart from that, we also have these gradient buttons right here, but it comes as a part of the Material Design Bootstrap's Pro component package. So we might have to pay for that, but that's something that we are not going to do right now. Even if that is the case, I should be able to use them, but then it won't be having the same styling as that of the buttons that we see here. I'll add a gradient button section as well, but if I paste these buttons here, then I won't be able to see the same styling. These would be the same um, default styles that were applied to them. And apart from that, I have these outline buttons as well that can be used. So let's copy the markup for that as well. H3 outline buttons. Let's paste and save and go back. So we now see the outline buttons as well. And then we have some other round buttons as well, but these also come as a part of the Material Design Bootstraps Pro package. Same is the case with these, and same is the case with these floating buttons as well. So even if I copy the markup for these floating buttons, I essentially won't be able to see them. Let's see that in action. Floating buttons. Let's paste the markup here, save and go back. And I'll just see the icons for these, but I won't really see the buttons in here. Okay, so then we also have fixed buttons like this, which gets active on click. I'm not really sure why this is not working right now, but this is something that gets active on hover. Uh, but again, these come as a part of the Pro package. The back to top button is also there, and we can essentially use this documentation here to make that work. Then we have flat buttons like so, but again that comes as a part of the Pro package here. We have buttons with icons, so let's try that in action. I'll go down here and add an H3 again, buttons with icons, and I'll paste the markup for the buttons with icons section here, and I should see the buttons here with icons as well. And then we have buttons with tags, and we have buttons with different sizes that can be used, buttons with different levels, and essentially a lot of things can be there that can be used. It's all customizable, but we won't really be able to use the buttons that come as a part of the Pro package. But apart from that, there are quite a lot of buttons there are, and different stylings that can be used and applied. And then there are different states that can be applied to a button. And then we also have buttons in the form of checkboxes and radio buttons that can be used. And then the data structure of it, which essentially can be used to make some changes whenever the button is clicked, and some things of that sort. So this was it regarding the Material Bootstrap buttons. In the next section, we are going to talk about cards. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Hello guys and welcome back. So in the last section we saw creating these beautiful types of buttons using the Material Design Bootstrap. Now in this section we are going to talk about cards in the Material Design Bootstrap library. So there are a lot of beautiful options that we have for cards as well. These are a few basic examples that we'll be having a look into. So I'm just going to quickly create a component for that that would host all these cards. So I'll create a component named cards like so, and then I'm gonna update my app routing module for the routes. These would be the cards and cards component that needs to be imported from its respective path here. And then I'm gonna also add the header, I mean the link to the headers file for that. And let me just change this to cards like so. Let's save this and go back to the application. So we have the cards as well now. It just says cards work, but now I'm going to just copy the markup for this particular card right here. So let's copy that. And this is the basic example for basic card. So I'll close all of these other files and I'll open the cards components markup here, and I'm gonna type in basic card and paste this template here. Let's see. So we have this whole UI getting the whole width of this card. But then again, that is something that can be fixed in CSS, so that can be done. Apart from that, we also have this wave effect for a card. So let's just quickly copy the markup for that. I'm just gonna start copying it from here, like so. And let's save this. Then I have another H3 that says wave effect, and I'm gonna paste this markup for the wave effect in here. And if I hover over this, then I should see it getting ready in here. Again, now this is something that's a bit misaligned with the markup that we saw here. But again, that is something that can be fixed using CSS, so I would leave you guys to that. Then we have some cascading cards like so, but then again, these are a part of the pro version of this material design bootstrap, so we won't really be able to use it. But then we have cascading panels like so. uh, let's just copy that and see that in action. So I'll copy, and I'll inside an h3 tag I'll type in um, cascading panels. Let's paste the markup here, and if I go at the bottom, then I should see these cascading panels. Again, there might be reasons wherein the style is not getting applied, but again, that is something that can be fixed using CSS. And then apart from that, there are some other types of other types of cards that can be used as well. So this is the reversed cascade card that can be used. Again, let's copy the markup for this, and I'll paste it here. Reversed cascade. Let's save this and go back. So I should now see a card for that. And again, this looks a bit similar to the one that we have here, with just the issues with this card that we have here under the image. It's not a bit aligned with it, but again, that is something that can be fixed using CSS. Then we have the action button footer as well, wherein we have some action buttons as well to the card. But then again, that comes as a part of the Bootstrap's Pro version, so we won't be able to use it. Then we have these stylish cards wherein we can change the colors in as well for the dark version and light version, like so. And we have the testimonial cards that again come as a part of the Pro package for Material Design Bootstrap, and the image overlays as well. So these are all the other types of cards, but even the cards that come for free are pretty beautiful, I guess. So that is something that can be used as a part of your application's view. So that was it regarding cards. In the next section, we are going to talk about drop downs, inputs, and forms as well. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Hello guys and welcome back. So in the last section, we saw how we can use cards that are provided by the Material Design Bootstrap library to us. In this section, we are going to talk about drop downs and inputs and forms as well. So let's start with the drop downs. Now I'm going to create a component again for this, and I'll just call this forms. because we are going to essentially use everything that we have regarding forms in here. And let's just close this, open the app routing module and add a path to that. I'll call this forms, and the component that I want it to load is the forms component, which again is something that I'll have to import from its respective path. I'll close this one, close the buttons and cards. In the headers component, I'm going to add a link to the forms route. So this is going to be forms and forms again. Let's save this and go back to the application. So we should now see the form section here. If I go, form works gets loaded up on the screen. Now let's close this one, close this file as well, and open up the forms section here. I'll just get rid of the sidebar and the terminal, and let's go to the drop down section here. These are the drop downs that are provided by Angular, both material as well as basic drop downs. So material drop down, as it seems, comes as a part of the material pro component. So that is something that we won't really be able to use. But apart from that, the basic drop down that comes as a part of this package is pretty straightforward. Basic drop down. So we just copy the markup, paste in here, and we should see a basic drop down like so. Pretty good, right? Then the material drop down comes as a part of the pro package. We also have a split button drop down. So let's try that out. Split button drop down, and this is how it's gonna look. And again, it works as the same way as we expected it to. So far so good. Then we have the styling as well, so we can essentially style them to be of different sizes. And for that, these are the classes that can be used. So btn-sm, and for this one btn-lg. So that essentially styles that. Then we have the drop up variation as well, so it opens up at the top, and then we can also drop them out in the bottom. We can align them left or right. We can also have drop down headers like so, and then we have the dividers as well in here. So if that is something that you guys are looking for, and then we have the regular or disabled links as well in here in the drop down. So again, there are a few things that can be done is disabled, and these are all the properties that can be used. So drop up is a boolean which essentially takes either true or false, and opens the drop down menu accordingly. Then we also have triggers and some output properties that can be binded to in here. So that was all regarding drop downs. Then we have input tags like here. So I'm gonna go to this section right here, and I'm gonna add in inputs. Uh, let's bring that to top. Let's save. And in the input fields, we have some basic input fields that are the basic signature um, material design input fields that we have. So if I copy the markup, paste it, and add it here, then I should see it as the basic example of input. Then we have also small inputs and large inputs like so. We also have inputs with some icons on them. So let's just copy this one and check how this looks. Uh, this would be inputs with markups. Save. Go back to the application, and we see the icon as well for an envelope. Then we have some placeholder text that can be set using the placeholder, just like for a normal input field. We have some pre-filled input text that can be done using the value property. Then we have error or success messages, and we can essentially um, use things like min length and max length on them. Min length and max length define the minimum maximum length of the inputs. Then we have data success and data error that provides a space to enter you custom errors or success messages if there are any. And then you also have validation types, like for an email, for password, and other things of that sort. And then you have disabled input fields as well that can be disabled using the class disabled right here. Then we have form layouts, different types of them, inline forms, then using the grid. So this is a grid form that you can see. And again, all the markups for all these types are given here on their website itself. Then we have checkboxes and radio buttons essentially, but these all come as a part of the Material Design Bootstrap's Pro component package, so we won't really be able to use it. Same is the case with radio buttons and the switches. We just have the basic inputs, but then again, this comes as a part of file input comes as a part of the Pro package, so we won't be able to use that as well. And same is the case with range. And we have the counter field that is, I guess, free, so we can use that, and the text area as well. But again, the autocomplete comes as a part of the Pro package. So these are all the things that comes as a part of the free Material Design Bootstrap package here. But then there were a lot of uh, paid things that we won't really be able to use, and that's where the Angular material comes into the picture. So we saw a lot of fields in here like checkboxes and radio buttons. Let's see if they are a part of this one. So if we have form controls, if we go over to say checkboxes, we can see that checkbox comes as a part of the material Angular material package as well. But in this case, it's free of cost, so that is something that can be used instead of the material design bootstrap package. And same is the case with switches. So if we go over to switch, let's say, I'm not really sure where that can be found. I guess it should be in buttons and indicators. Button toggle. Okay. Apart from that, we also have buttons, progress bars, and progress spinners that can be used, and some other components as well of this sort that can again be used from this material design or Angular material package. So for all these things that we have here, we will be using the Angular material package. So we'll in the next video see how exactly we can get started with the Angular material package, and how exactly can we use the components that are exposed by this module. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Hello guys and welcome back. So in the last section we saw that a lot of components that we have in the Material Design Bootstrap package are pro version, are or comes as a part of the pro version and are not available for free. So well, in that case we can use the components that are provided by Angular Material package, and it essentially is free, so we can use it without giving any money or so. So in that case, we'll have to introduce Angular material inside our Angular application. To do that, I'm going to go to the Get Started section of the website. The website that I'm referring to is the material.angular.io, which is the official website for Angular material. So I'll go to the Get Started section, and I'll see that if I see here, it asks me to essentially add a few or install a few dependencies in here. So I'm going to create a notepad file and add these dependencies so that I could install all of them at once. So it asked me to install Angular material, Angular CDK, then These are the alternative snapshot builds that I don't really want, but I need the animations modules. And then this was the step 2. Apart from that, we also have Hammer.js, but I guess that was already installed as a part of Angular material design Bootstrap, so I don't really need to install that again. We can actually check that out if this was installed or not. So I'm gonna go quickly to the package.json file and I'll see if Hammer.js was installed. So yes, I can see it being added to the dependencies array, which essentially mean that it is installed. So I just need about these 3 things in here. So I'll just copy this text and I'll open the terminal here. I'll clear the console and I'll paste this. So what is it's going to do is it's going to install Angular Material, Angular CDK, and Angular Animations to this particular project, and it will also save these to the dependencies that we have here. All right. So uh, while this gets installed, there are a few other things that I need to change. So these are the changes that I need to make. I need to import the browser animations module from its respective path here and add it to the app module. So that's what I'm gonna do. So paste that here and let's save this. Apart from that, I need to import that or add it to the imports array so that I can essentially use it. So I'll do that as well, like so. And then I don't really need to worry about the no op animations module because I need animations in my project. But I guess that would be all. Let's check. Yeah, I guess we'll also have to add a theme. So I'm gonna do that. So I'll go to the styles.scss and I'm gonna add the theme here like so. Let's save that and let's save the app module as well. And I guess that would be all to essentially run Angular Material. If I also need some material icons that I can use, I'll add that as well to the index.html file right below this. Now I'm not really sure if this is the ideal place to add this, but just for the sake of this tutorial right now, I'm just adding it here. And yeah, that would be all. So now let's go to the component section here and I'm going to open the forms and let's see checkboxes first. So this is the checkbox that I wanted to add. Now, for each and every component that we have in the in Angular material, there is a module that we have to import first and add to the declarations array. Sorry, add it to the imports array so that we can essentially use components that are exported by that module inside our module. So if I essentially wanted to like use most of these components that Angular material provides, then I'll have to add almost all those modules. But again, that is something that I don't really want to add in my app module. I want to keep this app module as clean as possible, um, and not pollute it with some other things as well. So for this purpose, then what I'll do is I'll create one more component, sorry, one more module, and I'm gonna call it app-material, like so. So it will create a module for me, and let's just close all of these. And I'm gonna open the app material module. Let's get rid of the terminal and the sidebar. I don't really need the common module in here, so I'll get rid of that from the imports array as well as I'll remove the import. But what I need now is the material checkbox module. So that is something that I'm going to import from its respective path. And I'm going to add it to the imports array as well because that is something that I want the this module to be registered on. And then I don't really need the declarations array, but I'm gonna need the exports array because I'm gonna export this module that I just imported from this module here. And inside the app material module that I have, I'll be importing it in the imports array of the app module that I have, which is my root module, like so. I'll also have to add its import path right at the top, like so. All right. So now what I can do here now is I can go to the forms component like so, and I'm gonna add the checkbox right here. Let's save this and let's check if it is working as expected. So I don't really see the checkbox text getting printed. Not sure why. Maybe if I reload this, I should be able to see that. Okay, now I see it. Right now I can essentially add a checkbox here, so I'm going to go to the overview section. I have this checkbox. This is a very basic checkbox, so I can go to this I can click on this button here to view the source, and there's just this source that I have to add. There isn't really anything inside the TypeScript source or inside the CSS right here. So just the HTML, I'm gonna add it to this file here, and let's save this and go back. So now I should see a checkbox here. If I click on this, then it works as expected, and it also gives me a feel of the Angular's material package. Right? So this is how you can essentially add a component from Angular material. Now in the next video, we are going to add some more basically more components that Angular material provides us. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Hello guys and welcome back. So in the last section we added or introduced Angular material inside our Angular CLI project, and we also added the checkbox that we see right here. Now there are, apart from this checkbox, there are some other components that can be used from Angular material, and we are going to use them in this video. So I'm gonna go to the radio button section and I'll just click on the API tab here. I'll copy this and add it to the Angular materials section right here, and I'll also add this to the imports array like so, as well as to the exports array like so. Now since we have already imported the app material module here, we should be able to essentially use these two modules, the mat radio module and the mat checkbox module. So I'm gonna go to the forms component section here, and I'll add this. Let me just go to the home first, and let's add a div with a class of container here. I'll cut this, and inside here I'll paste it like so, and let's indent this a bit. Now inside an h3 tag again, I'm gonna add a radio button text here, and let's go to the overview section, click on the view source, and let's copy this markup right here. Let's paste it in here and save it and go back to the application. So I see the radio buttons as well here. If I click on one of them, then it gets, or it works as expected, like so. So this was it regarding radio buttons, and apart from that, there are some other um, options that are provided in here, and the options can be again uh, you guys can go through all these options in here in the documentation. Then we have sliders. So this is again something that we saw in here in the Bootstrap, like in, I'm not sure, inside the progress bar it seems. And then we have these sliders and other things like so. But again, all of these come as a part of the Pro package, right? And then we have some other things of that sort, but then this is completely free that can be used. So let's see the slider toggle that we saw here in the input section. uh, we have it I think here inside the range operator we saw this, that we right now saw inside the slider, but we also have this toggle here, which is a switch. That's what they call it. So this again comes as a part of the Pro package here, but it is completely free here. So let's just use this one. Slider or slide toggle it is. So I'm just gonna add this H3 slide toggle, and I'll add the markup for this. Just copy and paste. Let's save this. But I'll be getting an error right now. Let's open this up, and it would say that mat slide toggle is not an Angular component that it can recognize. So that is because again we need to add a module for this one as well. So I'll go to the app module section, sorry, the app material module section, and I'm gonna add the import for that. I'll add the name of this module to the imports as well as the exports array, like so. And now I should be able to successfully make that work. So we have the slider toggle as well now. Apart from that, we have the slider that we saw here, this one. Let's use that. So I'm gonna again go to the API section, copy the markup for this, add the mat slider module, sorry, and I'm gonna copy the name of this module right here and add it to the imports array as well as the exports array. And then finally I can go to the overview section, go to the view source, and just simply use it like so inside my form section. So this is H3 slider. I'll add the markup for that. Let's save, go back to the application, and I should see a slider here as well, like so. All right. Then again, we have some other values as well, or some other attributes as well for this mat slider that can be used, as well as the orientation and other things of that sort. So that all can be seen inside the documentation. So apart from that, there are some other things as well, like inside the buttons and indicators. If I go to the progress bar section, we can use the progress bars as well, which can be inter or indeterminate as well as for buffer and query. So again, I'm gonna go to the API section of it, copy the name of this module that can be used, and I'm simply going to copy the name of the module, add it to the imports array as well as add it to the exports array, and then I'm gonna go to the overview section, and then we have these different types of progress bars. So let's copy this one. This is a determinate progress bar, so I'll add it to the form section, H3, or let's use an H2 here first. H2, these are progress bars. So this one right here is a determinate progress bar, which has again a value property till which it would be scrolled or it would be progressed. Okay, let me just go back to the application here, and I guess it was disconnected, so let's just quickly reload this, and I should now see um, the drop down or the progress bar here. It's probably not visible. Maybe if I, yeah, maybe if I scroll it a bit, then it would be visible, like so, right? So we have the determinate progress bar here. Apart from that, we also have some other different types of progress bars, like for this one, which is an intermediate indeterminate progress bar. uh, if I just simply copy this markup like so and just paste that here, this is going to be indeterminate progress bar. Let's see that in action. and this is an indeterminate progress bar. So it's just copy and paste here, nothing much apart from that. We have the buffer as well, which is of this type, and then we have the query, which again is of this type. So this is query like so. Let's go back and we have these four different types of progress bars that we see here, like so. Again, let's zoom out a little bit and we see that work. And then we also have progress spinners. So again, that this thing that was a part of the pro package here in the progress bars comes as free in the Angular Bootstrap module or Angular material module, so that can be used again. So it's a progress spinner inside H2 progress spinners. I'll add a progress. Oh, sorry, my bad. I should first add it to the imports array of the material module. So I'll copy this class over here, add it to the imports array, and then also add it to the exports array like so, and then I can essentially use the markup for this one. And it's as simple as that. So let's save this and see this in action. So let's reload this, and I should now see the progress spinner as well. So this is how you can essentially use some other components that are provided by Angular material here. Now, I don't really have the time to go through each and every one of them, but essentially you get the idea, right? That you can simply uh, first add this name to the imports array of the module in which we want to use it, or some other module from where we are exporting this module again, which can again be used, like in our case where we created an app module, added it all these module classes to the imports array, and then exported them right here, so that we don't really populate the app module or pollute the app module, and then inside the app module we simply add the app material module to the imports array and then essentially use it. So this was, I guess, it regarding Angular material as well as material design Bootstrap. Now, from the next video onwards, we are going to talk about Angular Fire too. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye. Hello guys, and welcome to yet another video in the part 7 of our Angular training. In the last few videos, we have talked about adding third-party libraries or modules like Material Design Bootstrap and Angular Material to our Angular applications. In this video now, and from this video onwards, we are going to talk about Firebase and adding Firebase to our Angular application and performing CRUD operations using Firebase. So what exactly is Firebase? Well, Firebase is a set of tools that is provided by Google for creating highly engaging and highly scalable applications. It's basically some sort of a backend that can be used with any type of front end. So there are a lot of platforms that you can choose Firebase for. You can choose it for Android, iOS, web, for Unity, as well as for C++ as your framework or as your platform. Now, apart from that, Firebase also provides us with a lot of products to choose from, and these are all the products that Firebase provides us with. It has real-time database and Cloud Firestore, which is basically an advanced version of the real-time database. We can use authentication like social logins and features of that sort using authentication. Then we have cloud storage, wherein we can store files on a cloud store. Then we have performance monitoring and cloud functions hosting. And then we also have some analytics related tools that is provided by Firebase to us. In this section, though, we are just going to talk about relational database, which is an object oriented database.
and it's quite different from the traditional relational database management systems that you might have heard about. Now, the scope, the difference between a relational database and an object-oriented database or a document database is out of the scope for this training. So I suggest you to refer to some articles online or some videos on YouTube to essentially understand the difference between both of these. Now, from the next video onwards, we are going to talk about adding our applications on Firebase console and then um, integrating that application that we built on the console to our Angular application. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Hello guys and welcome back. So in this section we are going to talk about the Firebase console. So just to navigate to the Firebase console, you can type in console.firebase.google.com and it will take you to this console that we see here. You might have to log in, but once you log in, you'll see a button like so, just to create a new project. You can click on this button and you can supply a name of your project and the country or region that you might want to specify, and then click on a create project. Once you do that, you'll see a screen something like this. Okay, and now you have a lot of things like analytics, authentication, database, storage, hosting, cloud functions, notifications, and several other things of that sort. Okay, now uh, we need to integrate our application with Firebase. So since our application is a web application, you'll have to follow the steps that are provided here. You can also integrate your iOS or Android applications with it, but the steps for those are different. We want to just focus on the Firebase application integration with the web app. So I'll just click on this button here, and it will open up a model, and in here we have these configurations. So I'll just copy this configuration here and I'm going to go to my application. I'll add that configuration to the environment.ts file. I'll add a key here named firebase config, and it's going to be an object with all these keys and values respectively. So once I save this, I can now readily use Firebase in my Angular application. So I'll just close this one, and now I'm going to go to the database section here, and let's click on the get started button here inside real-time database, and we have nothing here as such to be shown. So now from the next video onwards, we are going to add or integrate Firebase into our Angular applications. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Hello guys and welcome back. In the last section, we added some configurations from Firebase into our Angular application. Now it's time for us to install some packages that would be required when we want to interact with the Firebase backend. So I'll install some packages here. So I'll type in npm space I for install, and I'll install Firebase and Angular Fire 2, and I'll also save them so that they are added to my package .json file in the dependencies object. So let's wait for them to get installed. While that gets installed, let's quickly see what exactly needs to be done to add Firebase to our Angular applications. So first, inside the app module, we'll be importing these two modules. The first one is the Angular Fire module. We need to call a method named initialize app on this module and pass it the configuration that we initially created inside our environment. And then we are also going to import the Angular Fire database module because we are going to use the database or Angular Fire database from Firebase. Then the second thing that we'll be doing is inside a service that we want to interact with Firebase, we are going to import the Angular Fire database and the Angular Fire list from the database module of Angular Fire 2. And then we are going to inject the Angular Fire database as a dependency using our constructor. Then we can simply call a list method on the Firebase object that we just injected as a dependency, and we can pass it the name of a collection that we want to fetch. And then we will be seeing in the later sections of this series how exactly we can perform CRUD operations using Firebase. So let's quickly do that. I'm going to open my app folder, and inside the modules I'm going to import some dependencies. So I'll import them from Angular Fire 2 slash uh, just Angular Fire. I'm just gonna import Angular Fire module like so, and then I'm also going to import from Angular Fire 2 slash database, and from here I'm going to import Angular Fire database module like so. I'll also add it to the imports array. So I'll first call the Angular Fire module initialize app method, and I'm going to pass it the environment dot firebase config, and I'm also going to use the Angular Fire database module and add it to the imports array like so. All right, that is being processed now. I want to now use the Firebase, or I want my user service to interact with the Firebase database now, because I have this application here and I already have a user form that we created while we were working on a template driven form. So my intention here is that once I click on submit, then I should add the data that we or the user inputs from here into the database inside a collection named users. So for that, I'll quickly add these things to the database, or I'll quickly add some code to integrate Firebase with our service. So I'm going to add the Angular Fire database from, and it's already imported from at the top like so. So I'll just use that, and now inside the constructor, I'm going to inject this as a dependency. So let's call this Firebase, and this is going to be of type Angular Fire database like so. In here we are going to initialize, let's create a variable here first. I'm gonna call it this is going to be private, and I'm gonna call it user list, which is going to be of some type. Let's specify the type as any right now. We'll see what this type is. So user list is going to be equal to, now I'm going to call a method on Firebase named list, and I'm going to pass it the name of a variable that's going to be users like so. The result or the return type of this list object is or this list method is going to be Angular Fire list. So I should specify this type as Angular Fire list of type any, and I'm going to import that as well from Angular Fire 2 slash database. And now we are good to go. In the next video onwards, we are going to add some methods for applying or for performing CRUD operations on our Firebase database. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Hello guys, and welcome back. So in the last section, we added a user list which is retrieved from firebase.list, which returns an object of type Angular Fire list. Now we can now essentially create methods that would interact with Firebase and give us the things that we want or do the things that we want. So let's first talk about reading the objects from Firebase. So I'll create a method here named get users from Firebase, and this is simply going to return this dot um, user list like so. The second method that we're going to talk about is add a user to Firebase, and this is going to accept a user object which is going to be of type iUser, and we can now use the user list, and we can use a method named push on it which accepts data. So we can pass it a user and it will add that data to, or add that user to this list, which essentially references the user's collection. We can also update the data or update a user. So update a user on Firebase. Here we are going to get a user object which is going to be of type iUser, and I can simply use a user lists update method and pass it. Now this requires two things from me. The first one is going to be a reference or data snapshot or just a string, and the second one is going to be data. Now the reference, data snapshot, or a string is going to be a unique identifier for that particular document in Firebase. What I mean by that is the list method that we saw returns some data to us. Now, whenever we want to basically read a new record, we can use the update method, and Angular Fire can be called, or an update method on the Angular Fire list can be called. Now, this accepts two arguments. The first one is going to be a key, and this key acts as a unique identifier for a record inside our collection. And the second argument is going to be the object. Now, just bear with me, and let's say we have a key here. We'll see what this key is in real, but let's just assume that we have a key on the user object, like so. All right, so we have a key now. This user is going to be of type iUser, so we have already added the key to the the iUser interface, and now we are simply using it like this. Finally, we can also have a delete a user from Firebase, a method of this sort, and this is going to take a key which would be of type string, and again this key will essentially act as a unique identifier for a particular record in Firebase, and we are simply going to pass it the key, but instead of update we are going to call a method named remove, like so. Let's save this now. uh, Now that we are done with a user service, from the next video onwards, we are going to integrate these methods onto our component that we have already created, which is going to be the new user component. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Hello guys and welcome back. So in the last section we added a few methods to our service, and we are now going to use those methods from the service inside our new user component. So we already have this submit button here, and once the user clicks on submit, now I want to get or add a record to my Firebase database. So now inside my new user component, I've already hooked it up to my TypeScript classes submit method, where we were just logging the user form to the console. But now instead of that, I'll just call the user services, add a user to Firebase method, and I'm going to pass in the user forms value property. Let's save this, go back to the application, and let me just type in a few things in here, like so, and a few more things. want to specify mail as the gender, communication option as phone, and then click on I agree. Now let's click on submit and see what happens. So we get an error saying that permission is denied, and that should be legible because there are some rules that needs to be configured. Um, the rules here says that if auth is not equal to null, then only I can read or I can write. But right now I'm not authorized enough to have the read or write permissions. But since this video series is not about authorization, I'm not going to have a look at that. We are simply going to change the rules here to true for both read and write. Now this is something that isn't really recommended for applications in production because that way anybody would be able to read and write into your applications, and that's not really a desirable thing to do. So now let's just clear the console, and now let's go back to our database here. We still don't really have anything in here, but let's click on submit now, and we don't really see any errors. Let's go back to the database, and now I see a user's object inside which there is an object, this one. If I click on plus, then I should see all the details for a particular user here. If I click on company, I see the company details. If I click on address, I see the address details as well. All right, so this is how you can um, add a particular record to your database. Let's quickly do something for read operation as well. I'm gonna collapse this div here. Let's create a div again in here, a div. The class is going to be call md7, and in here I'm simply going to um, inside a pre tag I'm gonna print users and pass it via JSON pipe. Now I don't really have users right now, so I'll have to define some in this. So I already have a user list that I can use. I'll define a method named get users, and what this will do is it will call a method on the user service dot get users from Firebase. All right, now this is going to be returning a Angular Fire list. Now on Angular Fire list, there is like a method that we can use. So Angular Fire list exposes a method named snapshot changes. When we call this method, it returns an observable, and this observable essentially has the data snapshot for all the records inside a list in that collection. On each record, we have a payload and a key. This payload is going to have a to JSON method on it. When we call that method, we are going to return, we are going to get the JSON data for that particular list item. And then we have the key as well, which represents a unique identifier for a particular record. So like for this record here inside the users collection, this is going to be the key, and this is going to be the value of it. So now let's go back to our code, and I'm going to call for let's just again check what is the method. Okay, so it's the get users from Firebase, on which we have method like snapshot changes, which if I call, then I can um, call a for each method on it, and in here I'll get a user snapshot like so. And inside this user snapshot, now let's create a user here, which is going to be user snapshot sorry, this is not going to be this dot user snapshot, it's just going to be user snapshot. I'll again have a for each method on it, and I'll get let's call this users snapshot, and this will return to us a user snapshot, inside which I will let's see what we get on the um, user snapshot. So we have a key and a payload. What are previous key and type? We aren't really concerned about that right now, so we'll just ignore them as of now. Let's create a user here, which is going to be equal to user snapshot dot payload. Now payload, on the payload we have a method named toJSON that can be called. So this is going to give us a user. We are also going to add a key on this. Okay, and since this is weird name, we can use it like this so that we don't really get an error, and we are going to have a value of that using the key property here. Right now inside this let's use the user list here. So this dot user list, I'm going to set it to an empty array here, but once I get a user, then I'm going to call a push method on it, and I'm going to pass user as a user, like so. What I'm doing here is I'm simply typecasting the user object into an iUser, like so. And this will give me some users inside this user list. So now I can simply use it here, like so. And I'll have to create a button to get the list of users. So I'm gonna create a button with the class of button and button primary, and this is going to call get users when I click on it, like so. And the type of this button is going to be uh, button, like so. Get users is the name of the method. Let's confirm that and paste it inside here. Let's save, go back to our app. Now initially we won't really be getting anything here. Let's click on get user here, and we get the user that we had here. Okay, we also get the key, and this key is exactly the same as the key that we see here, this one. Let's quickly create one more object here. So I'll just type in the details for this particular user. John Doe jd at domain.com. Let's type in the phone number as anything, website as anything, street as again anything. I'm just typing in rubbish values here, and that's the least of our concerns right now. And let's select the gender and communication option. Right now we just have one object here. Now we'll see what happens when I click on submit. So if I click on submit, then if I go back to this list, I now see two objects, right? And that's the beauty of a real-time database, and that is that we didn't have to do anything out of the box. It essentially returns us all the updates that we have on this database here. We have also added one more object here inside the database, and that's the same object that is represented here when we get that, like so. We didn't really have to call a get user method again to get a hold of this updated data. It was updated automatically, and that is essentially because we are using the snapshot changes, which returns to us an observable, and then we can just use this to get a hold of the data, right? So this was it regarding getting some data as well as adding it in real time.
and seeing the changes getting reflected here. In the next video, we are going to talk about update and delete. So I'll see you guys in there. Bye. Hello guys and welcome back. So in the last section we saw how we can add and read data from Firebase database, real-time database, and now in this section we are going to talk about updation and deletion. Now let's first quickly go to our new user components template and add a button here to update some data. Let's create that button here with the type of button, and I'll name this update user, and I'm going to define a method on this one when the user clicks on it, which is now going to be called update user, like so. I'll copy the name here and add it to the TypeScript class, and I'm going to call a method on the user service. Update a user on database is going to be the name, and let's pass the data from this user service that we have, the first object that we had inside the user list. Let's also update the name of this to, let's say, user form dot value dot name, but I don't really have user form, so I'll have to pass that as an argument, which is again going to be of type ng form. And in the user form, I'll be passing from here as well, like so. Let's save this, go back to the template here, and this is going to call the update a user on Firebase method, wherein I've updated the name. Let's save this now and go back to the UI. So I have an update user method here. Let's first fetch the users. So these are the two users that we have. This is the first one and this is the second one. Let's add a name like Jacob Reglin here and click on update user. I'm going to update this user here, so the name John Doe should now be updated to Jacob Reglin. But I get an error message saying that it cannot read the property set of undefined, which means that there is some issue. So I'm gonna open the user service, and it says that it cannot set the property of undefined, which might be an issue here. Oh, so the thing is that instead of doing this, I have to set a name on it. Let's save this now, go back. Let's fetch the users first. And now let's click on update. And now it says that reference update failed. The first argument contains an invalid key in the path. Which it is saying because the update method and the create method that the Firebase's real-time database exposes doesn't really take a dollar key inside it as an argument for an object. So we receive the user here with a dollar key, but then we'll have to delete that key from the user object, and without that it's not going to work. So we deleted the key here using this delete keyword. Let's save this now and check if it works. So I'll just quickly get the users, and I have two users right now. The name is still John Doe. Let's type the name to change the name to Jacob Reglin again, and I'm gonna click on update user, and I didn't get any error, which means that the name is updated now to Jacob Devlin. So far so good. Now the final thing is going to be to delete a particular user. So I'm just going to copy this button here, and instead of update I'm going to click say delete user, and the name is going to be delete user for this one as well. I don't really need a user form here, and let's copy this method name here from here and paste it here like so. And I'm just going to call the user service dot delete a user from Firebase, and I'm gonna give it the user list of one dot dollar key. All right, let's save and go back. Let's again fetch some users. So we right now have two users here, and now I'm going to click on the delete user button, and I now just have one user here inside this list. And once if I go back to the database, I only see just one user here from on the database as well. Okay, so this is how you can basically perform CRUD operations on a real-time database inside Firebase.